Yo, what is up, fellow YouTubers and interwebicans? Alright, so we don't have Boris with us this time because he's actually in trouble, so he gets to stay in his cage, and we're hoping he's going to stay quiet for this video. But I'm going to go ahead and record a video in response to Leanne's video. She made a video about, piercings and the common procedures, cleanliness, hygiene, so on and so forth. So if you guys would like to see that video is going to be annotated right here on the shiny spot. So go ahead and click that. It'll take you straight to that video, and you can watch, her talk about like common procedures, hygiene, like hygienics, and all the standard stuff you need to know after or when you're considering going to a shop to get pierced. This video, on the other hand, is going to be talking about, well, the bad side, basically piercing yourself. Now, before I get into any part of this, I do not condone you doing it. It is dangerous, it is unsafe, it can cause a lot of issues, including scars, nerve damage, ruptured blood vessels, hospitalization, so on and so forth. So know that before you continue watching this video. I do not condone you piercing yourself unless you have piercing experience or medical experience. If you have either of those, and I'm talking actual hands-on experience, not just book knowledge. If you have actual experience, then feel free to continue watching, or if you're willing to take the risks, know that I am not responsible for what you do with your own body. You do you, I do me. So let's keep that clear right here, right now. I am not responsible for what you choose to do when I have said don't do it. Alright, so in regards to piercing yourselves, there are several ways to do it, and we're going to start from the very beginning, from the piercing itself. First of all, you have to decide what type of piercing that it is that you want. Now, I will say that dermals, those being like cheeks, eyebrows, anti-eyebrows, I would definitely stay away from, because those are far, far too risky for you to actually do yourself. Those are a surgical procedure that you should definitely go to a shop for. I would never do a dermal myself. Lips, nose, septum, ears, even tongue, realistically, are all ones that you can realistically handle on your own. Bridge piercings, I'm not too sure on whether that's a dermal or a regular piercing or not. So we'll classify that with dermals, because that's another one that I personally would not do on my own. So once you've decided where it is that you want pierced, whether that be your lips, nose, septum, or ears, pick the right tools. And by that I mean pick the tools needed based on the size of the piercing that you're getting, where you are getting the piercing, and what style of piercing you're getting. There are generally 3 styles of piercings. You have your studs, and this includes industrial bars. I'm going to put those in with the studs. Even though they're not the same, industrial bars are different. It's a straight piercing with a ball on both sides, for those of you that don't know. But there are studs, horseshoes, and captives. Those are going to be the 3 main ones, unless you're going with cartilage piercings in your ears, in which case industrials. But currently I have a horseshoe in my lip. What a horseshoe is it's a curved, horseshoe or hoop with a ball or spike on both sides. These are really good for ears, septum, and lip piercings. If you're trying to put like multiple piercings together, they go well with studs. And I probably wouldn't put 2 horseshoes together. So yeah, studs are your standard everyday piercing. It's got a flat end on one side, straight bar, spike or ball on the other side. These are your everyday piercings. Definitely start with those after you've pierced yourself. If it's your first time piercing yourself, use those, and use an extended bar. So it's going to be longer than your regular piercing. It's not something you're going to wear after you've healed. It's just for the swelling portion of piercings. In this video, we're going to be talking mainly about lip piercings, just because those are probably the most commonly self-pierced piercing other than your ear, but your ear reacts differently than your lip does, and most people already know about ears, plus it's really cheap to go to a shop for that, so just go to a shop for that. So you've got your piercing picked out. Oh, captive. Captive is a ring that is holding a ball. It's hard to explain, and I don't really have any to demonstrate, but basically instead of having two screw-on caps, it's basically the tension of the ring itself holding the ball in place, and the ball acts to keep the piercing closed, pretty much. So those are your three main types. Once you've picked one, whichever one you're going with, then you need to pick the tool associated with that. And for that, you're definitely going to need the size of your piercing. So pick which size you're going with. I normally go with 14 gauge because that was my last piercing that I've had. 16 and 18 are also really common and really easy to buy piercings for, so I would recommend going with those. The next thing you're going to want is your tools. Now, if you decide to pierce yourself, I highly recommend hollow pointed needles. You can buy them online for really, really cheap. They're safer, easier to use, and nearly painless. There's still a pinch as you pierce yourself. There's also the shock of seeing you stabbing a piece of metal through your face. So be aware that there's two things going on, shock as well as pain. You're going to misinterpret the shock for pain, so be aware of that. So I recommend hollow point needles, but you can use something solid. It doesn't have to be a hollow point needle. You can use a regular needle. Now, keep in mind that as soon as you pierce yourself, it will start swelling. So, things you cannot use to pierce your lip: a sewing needle, a staple, a paperclip, a thumbtack. Those will not work. Those are far too small for any piercing above, let's say, a 24 gauge, which is basically a piece of wire. So, use something, if you're going with something solid, use something that will accommodate for the swelling, at least temporarily until you get the piercing in there. It's got to hold long enough to allow you to put a piercing in. In my case, I went with a 1.4mm prodding tool. I kind of weighed the balances for me. Hollow point basically takes a piece of skin out, and the higher you go, the less likely it is for your piercing to retract. And this is for gauging up, for those of you that aren't quite sure what I'm talking about. Whereas a solid allows full contraction up to a 6 gauge, sometimes up to a 0, depending on your skin's elasticity, how well you take care of yourself, how well you take care of your piercing. So I went with a 1.4mm prodding tool. I've got one right here so you can see it. This is a prodding tool. It's not going to focus really well, but basically it's just a really, really sharp spike. It's used in computer repairs, things like that. I went with a 1.4mm because that is going to shrink to a 14 gauge. When I pull it out and allow for like 10-15 seconds for me to get that piercing in, it's going to shrink for 14 gauge to fit. So that's what I went with. The next step: you've got your piercing, you've got your size, you've got your tools. Sterilization. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sterilization is the most important step out of all of this. I don't care if you're piercing yourself with a pocket knife or a corkscrew. Sterilization is the most important thing, because if you don't sterilize, you run a very, 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 very high risk of an infection. So, sterilize. In my case, I use a torch lighter, which puts out a flame probably around 650 degrees on the prodding tool until we turn red hot. Then I soak it in vodka. Any high concentration alcohol will work, but make sure it's 40% alcohol by volume or higher. That way you have your highest likelihood of sterilization. I would avoid dark alcohols because that will stain your lip, or runs the chance of staining your lip, but that's just me. So I used vodka and a torch lighter. Those are what I went with. So, your piercing. your size, your tools. You've sterilized. Can we stick metal in our faces? Once you've prepped yourself. You definitely have to amp yourself up for it. It's not something you can just go, I feel like getting pierced today. Ow. Because it will hurt. And that's another thing to keep in mind is where you pierce. So, before you start throwing pieces of metal into your face, start picking locations. You want your lip done. Cool. Next, you need to be aware of what is in the area that you're piercing. You've got blood vessels, you've got nerves, you've got fat cells that help keep the shape of your lip. Do not pierce those. Those are really bad things to pierce. You need those, okay? Pierce a blood vessel and you're going to start bleeding out. It's not going to be massive, but it's definitely enough to warrant going to the emergency room. The nerves. If you hit a nerve, you are basically going to short circuit your body. Your brain is going to go, oh my god, what have I done? And your lip will hurt to no end. On top of that, you're talking massive amounts of swelling, potential damage, nerve damage, so on and so forth. Don't do that either. If you pierce the fat cell, for one, it's going to hurt like hell. Very bad idea. I would know. I pierced one once. So, take it from me. Do not do it. Hurts like hell. Cannot be pierced. I mean, it probably could, but it's a really bad idea. So avoid that as well, because on top of the pain, the swelling, the lack of pierceability, it's going to change the overall shape of your lip, and then you're just going to have a cool looking piercing, but a weird looking lip, so don't do that. So once you're aware of that, once you've found out everything there is to know, and you want to pierce the area, get a clamp. You can use needle nose pliers. You can use the actual piercing clamps that I highly recommend using if you're piercing yourself. In my case, I use needle nose pliers. But, yeah. Hold your lip exactly where you want the piercing. Have it marked off. And then pierce straight through. Don't think, oh, well, I'm holding my lip, I should pierce up, because then you're going to have a crooked piercing. Just pierce straight through, all the way back until the tip of whatever you're using touches your teeth. Make sure that your tool has gone all the way through so that it's a clean, even piercing. Then start drying up the blood, because blood is very, very slippery. It makes piercing very, very hard, and to some it grosses them out and panics them, and stress is not good. So, after you've got all that done, you've sterilized, you've got your piercing like actually in your face, put the piercing in. I recommend a stud, and this goes back to using hollow needles. If you use a hollow needle, you can literally just put the stud into the hollow needle and then pull the needle out, and the stud will be all the way through your lip. You can cap it and you're done. In my case, I don't do that, so it takes a little finicking. That's why I use something probably too big to use to pierce your lip. It's extremely painful. But that's why I do it, because that way I can pull the needle out and have plenty of time to actually get a piercing in. So, we're going over everything. We've pretty much gone over everything to get a piercing into your face. Make sure you have the piercing that's sizable to accommodate for the swelling. If you've got a horseshoe, you're probably going to be fine, but probably go with something a little bit wider. I recommend using straight piercing studs, the really long ones, because they accommodate perfectly for swelling. You can cap them, leave them in for about a week, and then you're fine. But let's say you've done all that, you've got a horseshoe in your face, the bleeding has stopped, the swelling is there, but it's just there, and you're done crying your eyes out because of how painful it was. You need to keep this clean, okay? Now, it's a recommended procedure that it's a recommended piece of advice, I guess, that you don't play with your piercing. But in the case that you've got a horseshoe like me, or you've got an elongated barbell, you need to keep that clean by any means. As Leanne says, you can get H2 Ocean, which is a topical spray that you spray on. It helps keep the area clean and sanitized. You can also get non-iodized sea salt. Some grocery stores carry this. A lot of pet stores carry this. You're just going to have to look around and find yourself some. Mix it in with some warm water. Use a Q-tip. dab it to the area. Another thing you're going to need that I don't remember her saying is antibacterial hand soap. Don't use hand sanitizer. Antibacterial hand soap. Okay? Sounds weird, but just trust me on this, okay? Preferably you should get an unscented one because other ones are going to taste really funny. But what you do is you dab some of it on a Q-tip, push your piercing all the way out so the bar is sticking all the way out, or so that the horseshoe, like all the bar is shown, not the studs. The studs should be inside your mouth. Scrub it along, the length of the piercing itself, and then rotate it back. Do this 3 to 5 times, and it's going to keep that area clean, bacteria-free, and you're just going to have a funny taste in your mouth for like 5 minutes. It is safe. It is not going to kill you. Those are very, very small dosages, and these days most hand soaps are really, really good about not poisoning little kids, so I think you'll be fine. Now, as she stated, piercings take a long time to heal, especially when you do them yourself because you're applying trauma to your own face. So be aware of this. It is going to take a while to heal. Luckily for me, I have an insanely fast healing rate. Mine only probably took about 2 weeks to completely heal up and be ready for a change out. You guys are probably not going to be the same way. Should be about anywhere between 1 and 6 months, sometimes up to a year. Do not change it until you are sure that the piercing has healed. The last thing you need is to pull out the piercing and have the threading irritate the piercing itself, cause swelling, possibly an infection, and give you a bunch of hassle and possibly even cost you your piercing that you worked so hard to do. Do not change it until you absolutely need to. Use high-grade piercings, surgical steel, stainless steel, titanium. Those are, metals to use. Don't go with, something cheap that looks like stainless steel, but you paid $5 for. You're not getting steel, you're getting copper that's been painted. Spend the money to actually get yourself good piercings. Spencer's, which I'm pretty sure is all over America, has really good high-quality stainless steel and surgical steel piercings that you can buy. I think they're like $20 a pack. Go for those. Those are going to save you a lot of hassle. Avoid painted piercings because those are a pain. Over time, the paint itself chips off, and those flakes can actually get into your piercing itself and irritate the area, leading to a risk of infection as well as pain. So avoid those, and you guys should be all good. Keep in mind, I do not recommend that any of you do this, but if you do, do it safe. Follow my advice in this video. Find other people that can help you. You can go down to your tattoo shop and ask them, hey, I want to pierce myself. What would you recommend the best way to go about doing this is? They're going to advise against it, but you may run into some that will give you advice. You may run into some that will tell you exactly how to do it. You just have to try. And if you are unsure at any point on whether or not you can go through with it all the way to the end, if you are unsure that, you even want the piercing that badly, don't do it. Just please save yourself the risk because you do not need to get an infection in your face because you thought you wanted a piercing and then stopped halfway through putting a piece of metal in your face. It is very painful. It can be dangerous if done wrong. And overall, it's not really worth it unless you have the experience to do it. I only do it because I've done it 5 times. I have medical experience and I have piercing experience at this point. So please, if you're going to do it safe. Go to a shop, they can do it, and, it's going to get done right. So that's all there is to it. Hopefully this enlightens some of you. Hopefully this advice helps some of you that are thinking of piercing yourself. And yeah, I love all of you very much. You're all amazing, beautiful people, and I will see you guys again soon. Peace out.